Good evening. Tonight, we're going to slow down and step into the world of a medieval baker. We'll spend an entire day with him, from the moment he wakes in the darkness before dawn to the moment he collapses into bed after sunset. This is not a story of adventure. There will be no knights, no battles, no grand events. Just bread. The making of bread, the selling of bread. The endless, repetitive cycle of mixing, kneading, shaping, baking, and selling that defined the life of a baker in a small English town in the year 1342. We will move slowly through each task. We will feel the texture of the dough. We will smell the smoke from the oven. We will hear the sounds of the bakery and the street outside. We will watch as the same actions are repeated, hour after hour, day after day, year after year. So settle in, get comfortable, and let us begin our day together, in the quiet darkness before dawn, in a small bakery on a narrow street in medieval England. It is still dark when our baker wakes. Not completely dark, there is a faint grey light beginning to show in the eastern sky, but dark enough that most people are still asleep. The world is hushed, silent, the kind of silence that exists only in the hours before dawn, when even the dogs have stopped barking and the night watchmen have finished their rounds. His name is Thomas, Thomas the baker. In this time and place, most people do not have surnames as we understand them. They are known by their occupation or their father's name: Thomas the baker, John the smith, William son of Robert. That is how it works. Your name tells people what you do, or who your father is, or where you come from. Nothing more complicated than that. Thomas is 43 years old, which is quite old for this time. Many men do not live this long. Disease takes some, accidents take others. The simple wear and tear of hard physical labour takes still more, but Thomas has been fortunate. He has never been seriously ill, save for a fever when he was a child that left him weak for several weeks but did not kill him. He has never been injured in an accident, though he has seen other bakers burned by their ovens or crushed by falling sacks of grain. He has simply lived, day after day, year after year, making bread. He lies in his bed for a moment, not quite awake, not quite asleep. His eyes are still closed. He is aware of the sounds around him, the way you are aware of sounds in that strange twilight between sleeping and waking. His wife, Agnes, sleeps beside him. He can hear her breathing, slow and steady, with a slight whistle on the exhale. She has always breathed this way. In the other room, separated by a thin wooden partition, his two apprentices sleep on straw pallets on the floor. He can hear one of them snoring softly, a gentle rumbling sound that rises and falls like waves on a shore. The bed is not comfortable by our standards. It is a simple wooden frame, roughly made, with rope stretched across it in a grid pattern. The rope has been stretched and retied many times over the years, as it stretches with use. On top of the rope lies a mattress filled with straw. The straw was fresh when Agnes stuffed the mattress last autumn, but it has been compressed over the months by the weight of their bodies. Now it is lumpy and uneven, with thin spots where the straw has been pushed aside, and thick spots where it has bunched up. But it is what Thomas has always known. He has never slept on anything else. He does not think of it as uncomfortable. It is simply a bed. He is covered with a woolen blanket and a sheepskin. The blanket is grey and scratchy, woven from the wool of local sheep. It is not particularly thick, but it holds warmth reasonably well. The sheepskin is older, worn smooth in places where the wool has rubbed off, but it is still useful. It adds another layer of warmth, and in October, warmth is necessary. The room is cold, very cold. Thomas can feel the chill in the air against his face, the only part of him that is exposed. His breath makes small clouds in the air, visible in the faint pre-dawn light that is beginning to seep through the cracks in the shutters. He opens his eyes slowly. The ceiling above him is barely visible in the darkness. It is made of rough wooden beams, blackened with years of smoke from the hearth and the oven. Between the beams, he can see the underside of the thatched roof. Bundles of dried reeds and straw, tied together and laid in overlapping rows. Here and there, small bits of straw hang down. Sometimes, in the wind, the whole roof shifts slightly, and you can hear it rustling and creaking. Thomas does not move for a moment. He simply lies there, gathering his strength. He knows what the day will bring. It is the same as every day. The same tasks, the same movements, the same aches and pains. His back will hurt when he stands, his knees will crack, his hands will be stiff from the cold. But this is how it always is. This is life. He sits up slowly, carefully. Yes, there it is. The familiar ache in his lower back, the dull throb that never quite goes away. Years of bending over the kneading table, of lifting heavy sacks of flour that weigh as much as a small child, of carrying trays of bread to and from the oven, have taken their toll on his body. His muscles are strong, but they are also perpetually sore. His joints are stiff. He is getting old, and he knows it. But he does not complain. Complaining would change nothing. This is simply how it is. He swings his legs out of bed and places his feet on the floor. The floor is hard-packed earth, cold and slightly damp from the morning dew that has seeped in during the night. The sensation is unpleasant, but familiar. He feels around in the darkness for his shoes. They should be right here, where he left them last night. His hand brushes against something. Yes, there they are. Simple leather shoes with wooden soles. The leather is cracked and worn, shaped by years of wear to the exact contours of his feet. He pulls them on, one at a time. The leather is stiff and cold. He stands and stretches, slowly, carefully. He raises his arms above his head and arches his back. His spine makes a series of small popping sounds. He twists to the left, then to the right. More popping. His knees crack when he bends them. His shoulders ache when he rolls them. He is 43 years old, and his body feels like it belongs to a man much older. He is wearing the same clothes he wore yesterday, and the day before that, and the day before that. In this time, most people own very few clothes, and they do not change them daily as we do. The concept of changing clothes every day would seem strange to them, wasteful even. Clothes are expensive. Fabric is expensive. Every piece of clothing represents hours of labor spinning, weaving, cutting, sewing. You do not discard such things lightly. Thomas owns 2 tunics, both made of rough wool, both the same dull brown color. The color comes from natural dyes, or rather, from no dye at all. This is simply the color of undyed wool. He wears one tunic while the other is being washed, which happens perhaps once every few weeks, when Agnes has the time and the weather is good enough to dry clothes outdoors. Under his tunic, he wears a linen undershirt. It is yellowed with age and sweat, and it itches slightly, but it provides a layer between his skin and the rough wool of the tunic. Under that, his bare skin. He wears woolen hose on his legs, like long stockings that reach to mid-thigh. They are tied at the waist with a leather belt. The hose are baggy and wrinkled, sagging slightly at the ankles. That is all. No underwear in the modern sense, no layers of clothing to keep warm, just the basics. He crosses the small room to the doorway. There is no door here, just an opening with a heavy curtain hung across it. The curtain is made of coarse fabric, probably hemp, and it is stiff with dirt and grease from years of hands pushing it aside. He pushes it aside now, and it makes a soft rustling sound. He steps through into the main room of the house. This room is the bakery. It is where the bread is made, where the oven stands, where the flour is stored, where the tools are kept. It is also where the family lives. There is no separation between work and home. They are the same space. This is how most people live in this time, especially those who work in trades. The shop and the home are one. You work where you live, and you live where you work. The room is larger than the sleeping chamber, perhaps 20 feet by 15 feet. Not large by our standards, but adequate for its purpose. The ceiling is low, perhaps 7 feet high at its peak, with exposed wooden beams blackened by years of smoke from the oven. The walls are wattle and daub, a framework of thin wooden strips woven together like a basket, then covered on both sides with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung. When the mixture dries, it becomes hard and provides insulation and protection from the weather. The walls have been whitewashed at some point in the past, but the whitewash is old and dingy now, stained with smoke and dirt and splattered with bits of dough that have dried and stuck to the surface. The floor is hard-packed earth, swept clean but not level. There are dips and rises where the earth has settled unevenly over the years. In some places, it is dusty and dry. In others, Near the door and near the wall where rain sometimes seeps in, it is damp and slightly sticky. Against one wall stands the oven. It is a massive structure, made of clay and brick, built directly into the wall of the building. It is the heart of the bakery, the most important thing here. Without the oven, there would be no bakery. The oven is taller than Thomas, perhaps 7 feet high, and wider than his outstretched arms, maybe 6 feet across. It is shaped like a beehive, with a rounded dome top. The opening of the oven is at about waist height, a dark mouth perhaps 2 feet wide and 18 inches tall. It is large enough that Thomas can crawl inside if necessary to repair the interior, which he must do from time to time when the clay cracks or a brick comes loose. The oven is cold now. It has been cold since yesterday evening, when the last batch of bread was baked and the fire was allowed to die. The clay walls have cooled overnight, radiating their stored heat into the bakery. Even now, in the pre-dawn chill, the area around the oven is slightly warmer than the rest of the room. But soon, Thomas will light it, and it will take several hours to heat up enough to bake bread. Several hours of burning wood, of feeding the fire, of waiting for the thick clay walls to absorb enough heat. This is not like our modern ovens, which heat up in minutes. This oven is massive, slow, patient. It takes time. First, though, he must wake his apprentices. He crosses to the partition that separates the main room from the small space where the apprentices sleep. It is not really a separate room, just a corner of the main room divided off by a wooden partition that reaches only partway to the ceiling. He pushes aside the curtain that hangs in the opening. The 2 boys are still asleep, dark shapes in the darkness. One is perhaps 14 years old, the other 16. Their names are Richard and John. They have been apprenticed to Thomas for 3 years and 2 years respectively. They will remain his apprentices for another 4 and 5 years, learning the trade of baking. When their apprenticeships are complete, they will be journeymen bakers, free to work for wages in any bakery, or, if they are fortunate and can save enough money, to open bakeries of their own. But that is years away. For now, they are apprentices, which means they work for Thomas in exchange for food, shelter, and training. They do not receive wages. This is the system. Parents pay a master craftsman to take their sons as apprentices, and the master provides everything the boys need while teaching them the trade. Richard, John, wake up. His voice is not loud. He does not shout. There is no need. The bakery is small, and sound carries. But his voice is firm, with the authority of a master speaking to his apprentices. Both boys stir. Richard sits up first, rubbing his eyes with his fists. His hair is tousled, sticking up in all directions. He is a thin boy, all elbows and knees, with a narrow face and large ears. He blinks in the darkness, still half asleep. John groans and rolls over, pulling his thin blanket over his head. John is older and broader than Richard, with thick arms from years of kneading dough. But he is not a morning person. He never has been. Come on, then. Time to start. Thomas does not raise his voice. He does not need to. The boys know what is expected. They have done this every morning for years. Slowly, reluctantly, John pushes the blanket aside and sits up. The boys sleep on straw pallets on the floor. The pallets are simply sacks of rough cloth, stuffed with straw. They are not comfortable. The straw is lumpy and pokes through the fabric. But they are better than sleeping directly on the cold earth floor. Each boy has a thin woolen blanket for warmth. That is all. They get up slowly, reluctantly. They are still tired. They went to bed only a few hours ago, after finishing the evening's work of cleaning the bakery and preparing dough for this morning. But this is the life of a baker. Early to rise, late to bed. There is no other way. They pull on their shoes, simple leather shoes, similar to Thomas's, and follow him into the main room. The cold air hits them, and they shiver slightly. Their breath makes small clouds. John, get the fire started. Richard, fetch water. The boys nod, still not quite awake, and set to their tasks without speaking. They have done these tasks so many times that they require no thought. Their bodies know what to do. John crosses to the hearth at one side of the room. This is a separate fire from the oven, used for cooking meals and providing light and warmth during the day. The hearth is simply a flat area of stone on the floor, raised slightly above the level of the earth floor. There is no chimney. The smoke simply rises up and escapes through gaps in the thatched roof. This means that the bakery is always somewhat smoky. especially when the fire is burning strongly. The smoke stings the eyes and makes the throat sore. But this is normal. Everyone's house is smoky. It is simply part of life. Last night, before going to bed, John covered the embers of the fire with a layer of ash. This keeps them alive through the night, smouldering slowly, so that in the morning the fire can be rekindled without needing to create a new spark from flint and steel, which is a difficult and time-consuming process. Now John carefully brushes away the ash with his hands. The ash is fine and grey and still slightly warm. Beneath it, he finds the embers. They glow red in the darkness, like tiny coals. He blows on them gently, steadily. His breath makes them glow brighter. He blows again and again. The embers respond, glowing more intensely with each breath. He reaches for a handful of dry straw from a basket beside the hearth. The straw is kept here specifically for this purpose, to kindle the fire each morning. He places the straw gently on top of the embers and continues to blow. The straw begins to smoke. Then, suddenly, it catches. A tiny flame appears, licking at the dry straw. John adds more straw, carefully, building the flame. The flame grows, spreading from one piece of straw to the next. Soon, there is a small fire burning, bright and cheerful in the darkness. He adds small sticks now, thin pieces of kindling that catch quickly. Then larger pieces, and larger still. Within minutes, there is a proper fire burning, with real flames leaping and crackling. The light from the fire illuminates the bakery, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Meanwhile, Richard has taken 2 wooden buckets and gone outside. The bakery is on a narrow street in the centre of the town, and there is a well at the end of the street, perhaps 50 yards away. Richard walks through the pre-dawn darkness, his footsteps echoing softly on the hard-packed earth of the street. The air is cold and damp. A thin mist hangs in the air, obscuring the far end of the street. He can see his breath. He wraps his arms around himself for warmth. The well is a simple structure, a circular stone wall rising about 3 feet above the ground, with a wooden frame above it supporting a pulley and a rope. A bucket hangs from the rope, an old wooden bucket with iron bands around it. Richard unties the bucket and lowers it into the well. He hears the splash when it hits the water far below. He waits a moment for the bucket to fill, then begins to pull on the rope, hand over hand, hauling the bucket back up. The bucket is heavy when it is full of water, and the rope cuts into his hands. But he is used to it. He has done this every morning for 2 years. When the bucket reaches the top, he carefully pours the water into one of the wooden buckets he brought with him. Then he lowers the well bucket again, fills it again, pulls it up again, and pours the water into his second bucket. Now both his buckets are full. He leaves the well bucket hanging from its rope and picks up his 2 buckets, one in each hand, and makes his way back to the bakery. The buckets are heavy. Water is heavy. Each bucket holds perhaps 2 gallons, and water weighs about 8 pounds per gallon, so each bucket weighs about 16 pounds. Richard's arms strain under the weight. Water sloshes over the sides of the buckets and splashes onto his shoes and the hem of his tunic. But he walks steadily, carefully, trying not to spill too much. Water is essential in a bakery. They use it for mixing the dough, for washing their hands, for cleaning the tools and surfaces, for dampening the cloths that cover the rising dough. They will need many buckets of water today. Richard will make this trip to the well a dozen times or more before the day is done. By the time Richard returns, the fire in the hearth is burning well. John has set a large pot of ale over the fire to warm. They will all have a cup of warm ale to drink before they start work. This is breakfast for a medieval baker. Ale, perhaps a piece of stale bread if there is any left from yesterday, maybe some cheese if there is any in the house. Nothing elaborate, nothing fancy. Just something to put in the belly and provide energy for the long day ahead. Thomas dips a wooden cup into the pot and drinks. The ale is weak, not much alcohol in it at all, perhaps 2 or 3%. It is more like a warm drink than anything intoxicating, but it warms his belly and wakes him up. The liquid is slightly sweet, with a yeasty flavour from the fermentation. The boys drink as well, each taking a cup. They stand around the fire for a moment, warming their hands, not speaking. The bakery is still dark, though the sky outside is growing lighter. The fire casts a warm glow on their faces. Then Thomas sets down his cup. Right then, let's begin. The boys nod. They set down their cups, and the work begins. The first task of the day is to prepare the dough for the day's bread. This is the foundation of everything. Without dough, there is no bread. Without bread, there is no money. Without money, there is no food, no shelter, no life. Everything depends on this dough. Thomas crosses to the large wooden table that stands in the center of the room. This is the kneading table, and it is the most important piece of furniture in the bakery. It is made of thick oak planks, perhaps 3 inches thick, joined together with wooden pegs. The surface has been worn smooth by years of use, polished by the friction of countless hands kneading countless batches of dough. The wood is stained with flour and dough, ground into the grain of the wood so deeply that no amount of scrubbing could remove it. In some places, the wood is slightly hollowed, worn away by the constant pressure of kneading. The table stands about waist high to Thomas, which is the perfect height for kneading. It is solid and sturdy, built to withstand the vigorous work of making bread. The legs are thick and braced with diagonal supports. The table does not wobble or shift. It sits there like a boulder, immovable. Next to the table stands a large wooden chest, perhaps 4 feet long and 2 feet wide and 2 feet deep. This is where the flour is stored. The chest is made of oak, like the table, with a heavy lid that lifts on iron hinges. Thomas lifts the lid now. It is heavy, and the hinges creak slightly. He props the lid open against the wall behind the chest. Inside, the chest is perhaps half full of flour. The flour is a greyish-white colour, not the pure white we are used to today. This flour has been ground at the local mill from wheat grown in the fields around the town. The miller charges a fee for grinding, taking a portion of the grain as payment. The flour that comes from the mill is coarse, with bits of bran still mixed in, and sometimes small particles of stone from the grinding wheels. The wheat itself is not as refined as modern wheat. It is a heritage variety, with smaller grains and a different protein content. Thomas reaches into the chest and scoops out flour with a large wooden bowl. The bowl is worn smooth with use, the wood pale and slightly oily from the flour. He lifts the bowl and pours the flour onto the kneading table. A cloud of fine flour dust rises into the air, catching the light from the fire. He scoops out more flour, pours it onto the table, and again, and again. He does not count, he does not measure. He simply knows, from 30 years of experience, how much flour he needs. The knowledge is in his body, in his hands, in his muscles. He does not think about it. When he has scooped out enough flour, perhaps 10 pounds, he sets the bowl aside and begins to shape the flour into a mound in the center of the table. He uses his hands to push the flour together, forming a rough pile. Then he makes a well in the center of the mound with his fist, pushing down and creating a depression, like a small volcano. The walls of the well are made of flour, and the center is empty, waiting for the other ingredients. Richard brings a bucket of water and sets it on the floor beside the table. Thomas dips a smaller wooden bowl into the bucket and fills it with water. The water is cold, almost painfully cold. He pours the water slowly into the well in the center of the flour mound. Not too much, not too little, just enough. Again, he does not measure, he simply knows. He has done this thousands of times. The water pools in the well, soaking into the flour at the edges, darkening it. He continues to pour until the well is perhaps half full of water. Then he sets the bowl aside. Next, salt. Thomas crosses to a small wooden box on a shelf beside the oven. This is where the salt is kept. Salt is expensive, one of the most expensive ingredients in bread. It is taxed heavily by the king, and it must be transported from the coast where it is produced by evaporating seawater. A pound of salt costs as much as several loaves of bread, but it is necessary. Bread without salt is bland and unpleasant, almost inedible. Salt also helps the dough rise properly and strengthens the gluten in the flour. Thomas opens the box and reaches inside. The salt is coarse, grey-white crystals mixed with impurities. He takes a handful and sprinkles it into the water in the well, then another handful. He judges the amount by the size of the batch of dough he is making. For this much flour, he needs perhaps 2 handfuls of salt. He brushes his hands together to remove the grains of salt that cling to his palms. Finally, the leaven. In this time, bakers do not use what we would call yeast, at least not the dried, packaged yeast we have today. Instead, they use a piece of old dough, saved from the previous day's baking. This old dough has fermented slightly overnight, and it contains the wild yeasts that will make the new dough rise. These yeasts are all around us, in the air, on surfaces, on our hands. The old dough captures them and keeps them alive. When you add old dough to new dough, you are transferring those yeasts, and they will cause the new dough to ferment and rise. Thomas keeps his leaven in a wooden bowl on a shelf, covered with a damp cloth to keep it from drying out. He crosses to the shelf and lifts the cloth. The leaven is there, a lump of greyish dough about the size of 2 fists. It has a slightly sour smell, yeasty and tangy. This smell comes from the fermentation process, the yeasts and bacteria breaking down sugars in the dough. He pulls off a piece of the leaven, about the size of his fist, and drops it into the well in the flour. It lands with a soft plop in the water. He covers the bowl again with the damp cloth and returns it to the shelf. The remaining leaven will be used tomorrow, and the day after, and so on. As long as he saves a piece each day and feeds it occasionally with fresh flour and water, the leaven will stay alive indefinitely. Some bakers have leavens that have been kept alive for years, decades even, passed down from master to apprentice. Now comes the mixing. Thomas begins to work the flour into the wet ingredients with his hands. He uses his fingertips at first, drawing flour from the sides of the well into the center, mixing it with the water and leaven and salt. He works carefully, methodically. The flour gradually absorbs the water, and the mixture becomes thicker. It is paste-like at first, sticky and wet, but as more flour is incorporated, it becomes more cohesive. It begins to resemble dough. He continues to mix, using his whole hands now, pressing and folding, pressing and folding. The dough is rough and shaggy, still full of dry patches where the flour has not yet been fully incorporated. Bits of flour cling to his hands. His fingers are coated with wet dough, but he keeps working, patiently bringing it all together. This process takes time, perhaps 5 minutes of steady mixing. He uses the palm of his hand to press the dough down, then his fingers to fold it over itself. Press, fold, press, fold. Gradually, all the flour is incorporated, and he has a rough ball of dough on the table. When all the flour has been mixed in, the real work begins, the kneading. Thomas gathers the dough into a rough ball, using both hands to shape it. The dough is still sticky and uneven, but it holds together. He positions himself at the table, feet shoulder-width apart, one foot slightly in front of the other. This is the stance he has used for 30 years. The stance that gives him leverage and allows him to put his whole body weight into the kneading. He places his hands on the far side of the dough ball and begins to push it away from him with the heels of his hands. The dough resists at first. It is stiff and heavy, but he leans into it, using his body weight, and the dough begins to stretch and flatten. He pushes it out into an elongated shape, then folds it back over itself, gathering it back into a ball. Then he turns the ball slightly, perhaps a quarter turn, and pushes again. This is the rhythm of kneading. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. Over and over and over. It is repetitive, almost meditative. The same motions, endlessly repeated. His hands know what to do without his conscious mind directing them. Push, fold, turn. The dough begins to change under his hands. At first, it is rough and uneven, with a pebbly texture, but as he kneads, it becomes smoother. The gluten in the flour begins to develop, creating a network of elastic strands that give the dough structure. The dough becomes more cohesive, more unified. What was a rough ball of mixed ingredients becomes something alive, something with texture and elasticity. Thomas kneads with a steady rhythm. His hands move in the same pattern, over and over. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. His breathing falls into sync with his movements. Exhale on the push, inhale on the fold. It is almost like a meditation, this kneading. His mind empties. He thinks of nothing. There is only the sensation of the dough under his hands, the rhythm of his movements, the ache building in his shoulders and back. After perhaps 10 minutes, the dough is beginning to feel different. It is smoother now, more elastic. When he pushes it, it springs back slightly. When he pokes it with his finger, the indentation slowly fills in. These are signs that the gluten is developing properly. But he is not finished. he must knead longer still. He continues. Push, fold, turn, push, fold, turn. The dough is becoming silky now, almost satiny. It no longer sticks to his hands as much. It has absorbed all the water it can absorb, and the gluten is well developed. The dough has a smooth, almost glossy surface. Richard and John have begun their own tasks while Thomas kneads. Richard has started a second batch of dough at the far end of the kneading table, following the same process Thomas just completed. Flour, water, salt, leaven. Mix, then knead. John is working with dough that was mixed yesterday evening and has been rising slowly overnight in wooden bowls covered with damp cloths. He is shaping this dough into loaves. John works methodically, taking a lump of risen dough from a bowl and placing it on the table. The dough is soft and puffy, full of air bubbles from the fermentation. He punches it down with his fist, pressing the air out of it. The dough deflates with a soft sigh. Then he begins to shape it, using his hands to form it into a round loaf. He cups his hands around the dough and rotates it in a circular motion, tucking the edges underneath. The loaf begins to take shape, a smooth dome with a seam on the bottom where the edges have been tucked in. He sets the shaped loaf on a wooden board dusted with flour and begins another, and another, and another. He works steadily, without hurrying, shaping each loaf with care. Each loaf must be approximately the same size, or they will bake unevenly. Some will be done while others are still raw in the center. John has learned this through trial and error over the past 2 years. Thomas finishes kneading his dough. He has been at it for perhaps 20 minutes now. His arms ache, his shoulders burn, his back throbs, but the dough is perfect. It is smooth and elastic, with just the right texture. He shapes it into a smooth ball and places it in a large wooden bowl. He takes a damp cloth from a peg on the wall and drapes it over the bowl, covering the dough. The cloth will keep the surface of the dough from drying out while it rises. He sets the bowl aside in a corner of the bakery where it is slightly warmer, near the hearth but not too close to the fire. The dough will need to rise for several hours before it can be shaped into loaves and baked. The warmth will encourage the yeasts to become active, feeding on the sugars in the flour and producing carbon dioxide gas, which will cause the dough to expand and rise. Thomas wipes his hands on a rag that hangs from his belt. His hands are white with flour, the lines of his palms traced in white. He brushes them together, and small clouds of flour dust fall to the floor. He takes a deep breath and stretches, arching his back. His spine cracks. He is tired already, and the day has barely begun. While the dough is rising, Thomas must heat the oven. This is a task that requires time, patience, and attention. The oven is made of clay and brick, and the walls are perhaps 6 inches thick in places. It takes a long time for the heat to penetrate through those thick walls and create the intense, even heat necessary for baking bread. In a modern oven, you simply turn a dial and wait 10 minutes. In a medieval oven, you must build a fire and tend it for hours. Thomas crosses to the large pile of wood that is stacked against one wall of the bakery, near the door. This wood was delivered yesterday afternoon by a man who sells firewood in the market. The man arrives every few days with a cart pulled by a donkey, the cart piled high with wood. Thomas buys as much as he can afford, which is usually enough for a week of baking. The wood is mostly oak and beech, cut into pieces about 2 feet long and as thick as a man's forearm. It is not completely dry, truly dry. Seasoned wood is expensive, and Thomas cannot afford it, but it is dry enough to burn, though it will produce more smoke than well-seasoned wood would. Thomas begins to carry armfuls of wood to the oven. He stacks it up on the floor near the mouth of the oven, within easy reach. He will need a lot of wood. The oven must be heated to a very high temperature, perhaps 400 degrees Fahrenheit or more, hot enough that the stones inside glow faintly, hot enough to bake bread in the residual heat after the fire has been removed. This requires a large fire, burning for several hours. He makes trip after trip, carrying wood from the pile to the oven. His arms strain under the weight. The wood is heavy, and some pieces have sharp edges that dig into his forearms. But he continues, methodically, until he has a large pile of wood beside the oven. Perhaps 100 pounds of wood, maybe more. When the wood is ready, he turns his attention to building the fire. He takes a long stick from beside the hearth. The end of the stick has been wrapped with a piece of cloth and tied with twine. He dips the cloth end into a small pot of tallow-rendered animal fat that sits beside the hearth. The cloth absorbs the tallow, becoming saturated with it. This is his torch. He lights the torch in the fire in the hearth. The tallow-soaked cloth catches immediately, flaming up with a bright, smoky flame. The tallow burns with an unpleasant smell, greasy and acrid, but it provides a good, long-lasting flame. Carrying the torch carefully, Thomas crouches down in front of the oven. The opening is at about waist height when he is standing, but he needs to get lower to crawl inside. He gets down on his hands and knees, holding the torch in one hand, and crawls partway into the oven. The interior of the oven is a large dome-shaped space, perhaps 5 feet in diameter and 4 feet high at the center. The walls and ceiling are blackened with soot from countless fires. The floor of the oven is made of flat stones, fitted carefully together to create a smooth surface. This is where the loaves will sit while they bake. The stones are arranged in a slight dome shape, higher in the center than at the edges, which helps with heat distribution. Thomas begins to build a fire in the center of the oven floor. He starts with kindling small, thin pieces of wood shavings, and a handful of dry straw. He arranges them in a loose pyramid shape, leaving spaces for air to circulate. Fire needs air to burn. If you pack the wood too tightly, the fire will suffocate. When he is satisfied with his arrangement of kindling, he touches his torch to the base of the pyramid. The straw catches immediately, flaring up with bright flames. The wood shavings catch next, and then the small sticks of kindling. Within moments, he has a small fire burning in the center of the oven. He backs out of the oven and stands, watching. The fire is small, but it is growing. The flames are licking upward, reaching toward the dome of the oven ceiling. Smoke pours out of the oven mouth, billowing into the bakery. The smoke is thick and grey, with a sharp, woody smell. It makes Thomas's eyes water. He adds more wood to the fire, larger pieces now. He uses a long stick to push them into the oven, arranging them carefully on top of the burning kindling. The wood catches quickly, and the fire grows. Flames leap higher. More smoke pours out. The bakery begins to fill with smoke. This is normal. On baking days, the bakery is always smoky. The smoke rises to the ceiling and escapes through the gaps in the thatch, but not quickly enough to prevent the room from becoming hazy. Thomas's eyes water continuously. His throat feels scratchy, but he is used to it. He has breathed this smoke every baking day for 30 years. He continues to feed the fire, adding wood piece by piece. The fire grows larger, more intense. The flames are now 3 feet high, filling the dome of the oven with leaping, dancing light. The heat radiating from the oven mouth is becoming intense. Thomas can feel it on his face, his hands, his chest. It is like standing next to a bonfire on a summer night, but more focused, more directional. He has to be careful not to add too much wood too quickly. If he smothers the fire with too much wood, it will produce more smoke than heat. But if he adds too little, the fire will die down and it will take even longer to heat the oven. It is a delicate balance, learned through experience. After an hour, the fire is burning steadily. The oven mouth glows with orange light. The heat is now so intense that Thomas cannot stand directly in front of the opening for more than a few seconds. He has to approach from the side, averting his face, quickly pushing in another piece of wood before retreating. The pile of wood beside the oven is gradually shrinking. He has burned perhaps a third of it already. He will need to burn at least half, maybe more, before the oven is ready. While he tends the fire, life continues in the bakery around him. Richard has finished kneading his batch of dough and has set it aside to rise. Now he is washing the kneading table, scrubbing away the dried bits of dough that cling to the surface. He uses a wet rag and puts his weight into it, scrubbing hard. The dough is stubborn, clinging to the wood, but gradually it comes loose. John has finished shaping loaves and is now covering them with damp cloths and setting them aside to rise. The shaped loaves need to rise for a while before baking, usually about an hour. During this time, the yeasts in the dough will continue to produce gas, and the loaves will expand, becoming lighter and airier. Agnes has emerged from the sleeping chamber. She has dressed and pinned up her hair. She does not speak. She simply goes about her tasks, as she does every morning. She crosses to the hearth and begins to prepare porridge for the midday meal. She pours oats into a pot, adds water from one of Richard's buckets, adds a pinch of salt. She stirs it with a wooden spoon and sets the pot over the fire to cook. The morning passes slowly. The sun has risen now, and light streams through the small window at the front of the bakery. A window no larger than a man's head, covered with oiled cloth instead of glass. Glass is far too expensive for a baker's window. The oiled cloth lets in some light but keeps out the wind and rain, more or less. Thomas continues to tend the fire. He has fallen into a rhythm. Add wood. Wait. Add wood. Wait. The fire roars and crackles. The heat builds. The oven walls, which were cool when he started, are now warm to the touch on the outside. Inside, they are hot. Very hot. The clay and brick are slowly absorbing the heat, storing it, so that later, after the fire is removed, they will radiate that heat back out, baking the bread. After 2 hours, the fire is burning intensely. The wood has been reduced to glowing embers and white ash. Thomas adds more wood, feeding the fire, keeping it going. After 3 hours, he judges that the oven is ready. He knows this not by any measurement, but by experience. He looks at the color of the stones inside the oven. They are no longer black with soot. They have burned clean in the intense heat, and they now glow with a faint, dull red color. This is the sign that the oven is hot enough. If the stones are not glowing, the oven is not ready. If they are glowing too brightly, the oven may be too hot, and the bread will burn. He stops adding wood and lets the fire burn down. The flames gradually die away, shrinking, flickering, and finally going out. What remains are glowing embers and a thick layer of white ash. Now comes the task of clearing the oven. Thomas takes a long-handled tool from beside the oven. It looks something like a garden hoe, with a broad, flat blade and a handle perhaps 6 feet long. This is called an oven rake. He uses it to pull the embers and ash out of the oven, dragging them across the stone floor and out through the oven mouth. The embers are still glowing hot, and when he drags them out onto the bakery floor, they glow brightly in the relatively dim light of the bakery. The ash is grey-white, fine and powdery. It rises in clouds as he works, mixing with the smoke that still hangs in the air. He works carefully, methodically, pulling out all the embers and ash. It takes time. The oven floor is large, and there is a lot of ash. Finally, when he is satisfied that he has removed all the embers, he sets the rake aside. Now he takes a long-handled broom. It is made of bundled twigs, tied together at one end and attached to a long wooden handle. He dips the broom into a bucket of water, soaking the twigs, then uses it to scrub the floor of the oven. The wet broom hisses and steams as it touches the hot stones. Great clouds of steam billow out of the oven mouth, filling the bakery with damp, hot air. Thomas scrubs thoroughly, pushing the broom back and forth, washing away the last bits of ash and soot. If there is ash left on the floor, it will stick to the bottom of the loaves and make them gritty and unpleasant to eat. When he is satisfied that the floor is clean, he pulls the broom out and sets it aside. Steam continues to pour out of the oven for a few moments, then gradually subsides. The oven is ready. The stones are clean and glowing with residual heat. It is time to bake. The loaves that John shaped earlier are ready to bake now. They have been rising under their damp cloths for the past hour, and they have expanded nicely. They are now roughly twice the size they were when they were first shaped. The dough has become light and airy, full of tiny bubbles created by the fermenting leaven. When you press gently on the surface of a loaf with your finger, the indentation slowly springs back. This is a sign that the dough is properly risen and ready to bake. Thomas removes the cloth from the first loaf. The surface of the dough is slightly moist from being under the cloth, and it has a smooth, satiny appearance. He can see tiny bubbles just under the surface, evidence of the fermentation happening inside. He takes a wooden peel from where it leans against the wall beside the oven. The peel is essentially a large, flat paddle made from a single piece of wood, perhaps 18 inches wide and 2 feet long, with a long handle attached. The handle is perhaps 6 feet long, which allows Thomas to reach deep into the oven without having to put his hands into the intense heat. The surface of the peel is smooth and slightly floury. Before placing a loaf on it, Thomas sprinkles more flour onto the surface. This is important. If the loaf sticks to the peel, it will be impossible to slide it off into the oven. The flour acts as a lubricant, allowing the loaf to slide smoothly. He carefully lifts the first loaf from its board and places it on the peel. The loaf is heavy, perhaps 2 pounds, soft and yielding under his hands. He positions it in the center of the peel. Now comes the tricky part. He must slide the loaf from the peel onto the hot stone floor inside the oven. This requires a quick, confident motion. If he is too slow or hesitant, the loaf will stick to the peel and will not slide off cleanly. If he is too rough, the loaf will tear or deform. Thomas positions himself in front of the oven opening. The heat coming from the oven is tremendous. Even standing 2 feet away, he can feel it on his face, his hands, his chest. It is like the heat of a blacksmith's forge, intense and almost physical. He slides the peel into the oven, through the opening, until the loaf is positioned where he wants it on the stone floor. Then, with a quick, practiced jerk, he pulls the peel back toward him. The loaf slides off the peel and lands with a soft thump on the hot stones. Perfect. He quickly places another loaf on the peel, slides it into the oven, and deposits it beside the first. Then another, and another. He works quickly, efficiently. The heat from the oven is so intense that he cannot keep his hands near the opening for long. His face is flushed and sweating. His hands are hot, almost painful, from the radiant heat. Within a few minutes, the oven is full. He has managed to fit 20 loaves inside, arranged in neat rows on the stone floor. The loaves are evenly spaced, not touching each other. This is important. If they are too close together, they will bake unevenly, with the sides that are touching remaining pale and soft while the exposed sides brown. Thomas steps back from the oven and wipes the sweat from his face. His tunic is soaked with perspiration, his hair is damp, but the loaves are in. Now there is nothing to do but wait. He takes the wooden door that closes the oven mouth and positions it over the opening. The door is made of thick wooden planks, perhaps 3 inches thick, and it fits snugly into the opening. There are no hinges. The door simply sits in place, held by its own weight and by the shape of the opening. The door traps the heat inside the oven, creating a sealed environment where the bread can bake evenly. With the door in place, the bakery becomes slightly less hot, slightly less filled with radiant heat. The roar and crackle of the fire are gone, replaced by silence. The only sound is the distant murmur of the town outside, the occasional voice, the sound of a cart passing in the street. Now there is time to rest, if only briefly. Thomas sits down on a rough wooden bench beside the kneading table. He is exhausted already, and it is not yet midday. His back aches. His shoulders burn from kneading. His hands are sore from handling the hot peel. His eyes sting from the smoke. But this is normal. This is how it always is. This is the life of a baker. Agnes ladles porridge into wooden bowls. The porridge has been cooking slowly over the fire for the past hour, and it is now thick and grey, with a consistency somewhere between gruel and paste. It is not appetizing in appearance, but it is hot and filling, and that is what matters. The oats provide energy, calories for the hard physical work of the day. Thomas takes a bowl and a wooden spoon and eats slowly, blowing on each spoonful to cool it. The porridge is plain, with only a slight saltiness from the pinch of salt Agnes added while cooking it. There is no butter, no honey, no milk to make it richer. Those things are luxuries, too expensive for a baker's household. This is the food of the working poor. Simple, plain, but adequate. Richard and John also eat their porridge, sitting on the floor with their backs against the wall, their bowls in their laps. They eat quickly, hungrily. They are young and always hungry, it seems. They could eat twice this amount and still not be satisfied. After they have eaten, Agnes collects the bowls and takes them to a bucket of water to be washed. Thomas sits for a moment longer, simply breathing. His mind is empty. He stares at nothing in particular, seeing the dust motes that float in the beam of light from the window, seeing the smoke that still hangs in the air, seeing nothing. Then he stands. There is work to do. More dough must be kneaded, more loaves must be shaped. The process never truly stops. He crosses to the bowl where the first batch of dough has been rising. He pulls back the damp cloth. The dough has expanded, nearly filling the bowl. It is puffy and soft, with a slightly sour smell. Good. It is ready to be shaped. He tips the bowl, and the dough slides out onto the kneading table with a soft plop. It is soft and yielding, full of air. He punches it down with his fist, pressing the air out of it. The dough deflates with a satisfying sigh, shrinking to perhaps half its previous size. He divides the dough into portions, using his hands to pull off pieces of roughly equal size. He weighs each piece in his hand, judging by feel whether it is the right size. Too large, and the bread will take too long to bake. Too small, and it will bake too quickly and become hard and dry. He has done this so many times that he can judge the weight accurately without thinking about it. When he has divided the dough into portions, he begins to shape them into loaves. He takes one portion and places it on the table in front of him. He cups his hands around it and begins to rotate it in a circular motion, tucking the edges underneath. The dough slowly forms into a smooth, round ball. He sets it aside on a floured board and begins another. Richard and John join him, each taking portions of dough and shaping them. The three of them work side by side at the table, their hands moving in the same motions, over and over. Shape, set aside. Shape, set aside. The rhythm is steady, almost mechanical. Time passes. The sun moves across the sky. The beam of light from the window shifts, moving slowly across the bakery floor. Finally, Thomas judges that the bread in the oven has baked long enough. He has no clock, no timer. He simply knows, from experience, roughly how long it takes. About an hour, perhaps a bit more. He crosses to the oven and carefully removes the wooden door. A rush of hot air and steam pours out, along with the most wonderful smell imaginable. The smell of baking bread is one of the best smells in the world. It is rich and yeasty and wholesome, with hints of caramelized sugars from the crust. It fills the bakery, overwhelming all other smells. It is a smell that makes your mouth water, makes your stomach growl, even if you have just eaten. Thomas picks up the peel and slides it into the oven, under one of the loaves. The loaves have risen even more during baking, expanding in the heat. They are now golden brown, with a hard, crusty exterior. He pulls the loaf out and examines it. The crust is thick and hard, crackling slightly as it cools in the air. He taps it with his knuckles, and it makes a hollow sound, like tapping on a wooden door. This is good. This means the bread is baked through, with no raw dough in the center. He sets the loaf on a wooden rack to cool. The rack is simply a frame of wooden slats, raised off the floor on short legs so that air can circulate around the bread. This is important. If you set hot bread directly on a solid surface, the bottom will become damp and soggy from the steam that condenses. But on a rack, with air circulating, the bread cools evenly and the crust stays crisp. He pulls out the rest of the loaves, one by one, examining each and setting them on the rack to cool. Most are perfect. A few are slightly darker on one side, where they were positioned closer to the hot wall of the oven. But this is normal. The oven does not heat perfectly evenly, and some variation is to be expected. When all the loaves are out, Thomas loads the next batch into the oven. More loaves, waiting to be baked, and so the cycle continues. Load, bake, remove. Load, bake, remove. Over and over, throughout the day. By mid-afternoon, the bakery is filled with bread. Loaves are stacked on the cooling racks, on the kneading table, on boards set across barrels, on every available surface. There must be 60 or 70 loaves by now, maybe more. The smell is overwhelming, in the very best possible way. If you walked past the bakery on the street outside, you would smell the bread from 20 yards away. The smell would make you stop, make you turn your head, make you think about coming inside to buy a loaf. Thomas has been working for perhaps 10 hours now. He started before dawn, and the sun is now well past its zenith, moving slowly toward the western horizon. His back aches terribly. Not just a dull ache, but sharp pains that shoot up his spine when he bends or twists. His hands are rough and cracked from the flour and the heat and the constant washing and drying. The skin on his palms is dry and hard, with deep cracks in places. His fingertips are numb from kneading so much dough. His eyes burn from the smoke that has filled the bakery all day. His throat is sore from breathing that smoke, but he does not stop. There is still work to do. There is always work to do. Some of the bread must be delivered to customers who have placed standing orders. In medieval towns, many people do not have their own ovens. Ovens are expensive to build and maintain, and they require a lot of fuel. So instead, many people either bring their dough to the baker, who bakes it for them for a small fee, or they order bread directly from the baker and have it delivered to their homes. Thomas has several such customers. There is Father Benedict at St. Mary's Church, who orders 4 large loaves every week. The bread is used for communion and also for feeding the poor who come to the church for alms. There is William the innkeeper at the sign of the Red Lion, who buys 24 loaves every 3 days to feed his guests. There are several wealthy households, a wool merchant, a goldsmith, the town bailiff who order fine white bread, made from carefully sifted flour that has most of the bran removed. This white bread is more expensive, but it is softer and more refined, a sign of status. Richard is given the task of making deliveries. He loads 12 loaves into a large wicker basket. The basket has a cloth lining to keep the bread clean and 2 sturdy handles. When it is full, it is heavy, perhaps 30 pounds or more. Richard lifts it and settles it on his shoulder, adjusting his posture to balance the weight. He sets off through the narrow streets of the town, the basket balanced on his shoulder. He knows the route by heart. He has made these deliveries every afternoon for 2 years. First to the church, which is only a few streets away, then to the inn, which is in the market square, then to the wool merchant's house on the edge of town. The streets are busy at this time of day. People are everywhere, going about their business. Merchants call out their wares. Carts rattle over the cobblestones. Dogs bark and run between people's legs. Children play in the street, kicking a leather ball back and forth. A woman throws a bucket of dirty water out of an upper window, and Richard has to skip aside to avoid being splashed. Meanwhile, back at the bakery, Thomas prepares the bread that will be sold from the shop. The front of the bakery, facing the street, has a small window with a hinged wooden shutter. When the shutter is open, it creates a kind of counter, and people can buy bread directly from Thomas without entering the bakery. He opens the shutter now, propping it open with a stick. The shutter is heavy, made of thick planks, and it takes some effort to lift and prop it. When it is open, the interior of the bakery is visible from the street, or at least partially visible. People can see the oven, the kneading table, the racks of cooling bread. Thomas arranges several loaves on the windowsill, positioning them where people can see them. The loaves are golden brown and crusty, appealing to the eye. The smell of fresh bread wafts out into the street, attracting attention. Almost immediately, people begin to approach. A woman in a grey woolen dress, with a basket over her arm. Her name is Margaret, and she is the wife of a carpenter who lives 2 streets away. Thomas knows her. She buys bread from him 3 or 4 times a week. "Good afternoon, Thomas. 2 loaves, please, the usual size." "Good afternoon, Margaret. 2 loaves. That'll be a farthing." A farthing is a small copper coin, 1/4 of a penny. A loaf of bread typically costs a halfpenny or a farthing, depending on its size and the type of flour used. Margaret reaches into a small leather purse that hangs from her belt and pulls out a coin. She hands it to Thomas, and he hands her 2 loaves wrapped in a scrap of cloth to keep them clean. "Thank you, Thomas." "Good day, Margaret." She walks away, and another customer approaches. A young boy, perhaps 8 years old, with a dirty face and a coin clutched tightly in his fist. He is the son of a tanner who lives near the river, where the smell of tanning hides is strong and unpleasant. "1 loaf, please, sir. The small one, there." "Right. A halfpenny." The boy opens his fist and places a small silver coin on the windowsill. "A halfpenny." Thomas takes the coin and gives the boy a small loaf, smaller than the ones he gave Margaret. The boy clutches the loaf to his chest and runs off down the street. And so it goes. Customer after customer. A constant stream of people, coming to buy bread. Some are regulars, people Thomas sees every day or every few days. Others are strangers, passing through the town, attracted by the smell of fresh bread. He serves them all patiently, taking their coins and placing them in a leather pouch at his belt, wrapping their loaves in cloth scraps, handing them over. The afternoon passes in this way. The sun moves slowly across the sky. Shadows lengthen. The angle of the light changes, becoming more golden, less harsh. The street outside is still busy, but the pace is slowing. People are beginning to think about their evening meals, about finishing their work for the day. By late afternoon, most of the bread has been sold or set aside for delivery. Perhaps 12 loaves remain. These will be sold tomorrow, if they can be. Bread keeps for several days, though it becomes harder and staler with each passing day. By the 3rd day, it is quite hard, suitable only for dunking in soup or ale to soften it. By the 4th or 5th day, it is nearly inedible, more like a brick than bread. But it does not go to waste. Hard bread can be ground into breadcrumbs, or it can be fed to pigs, or it can be given to beggars. Thomas closes the shutter and secures it with a wooden peg. He is done selling for the day. Now comes the cleaning. There is always cleaning to do in a bakery. The oven must be cleaned, the kneading table must be scrubbed, the floor must be swept, the tools must be washed and put away. The buckets must be emptied and rinsed. It never ends. John fetches more water from the well. His arms must be tired from all the trips he has made today, but he does not complain. He never complains. He is a quiet boy, steady and reliable. He will make a good baker someday, Thomas thinks. Agnes takes a wet rag and begins to scrub the kneading table. She puts her weight into it, scrubbing hard. The table is covered with dried bits of dough, flour ground into the grain of the wood, sticky patches where dough has been kneaded. She scrubs and scrubs, dipping the rag into the bucket of water, wringing it out, scrubbing again. Gradually, the table becomes cleaner. Richard, who has returned from his deliveries, sweeps the floor with a broom made of bundled twigs. The floor is covered with flour, bits of dough, ash from the oven, and general dirt tracked in from the street. He sweeps it all toward the door, where it will be swept outside into the street. Street cleaning is not really a concept in this time. Everyone simply sweeps their dirt into the street, where it accumulates until rain washes it away or until it is trampled down into the mud. Thomas attends to the oven. The fire has long since died away completely, and the oven is cooling. By tomorrow morning, it will be cold again, and the whole process will begin anew. He uses the peel to scrape out any bits of burnt crust or dough that may have stuck to the oven floor during the day's baking. There are always a few. Sometimes a loaf will have a soft spot on the bottom, and when it is slid onto the hot stones, that soft spot will stick and tear away when the loaf is removed. These bits of dough char and burn, and they must be scraped out or they will contaminate the next day's bread. He also sweeps out the ash and embers that accumulated during the day. There is a surprising amount of ash, several shovelfuls. He carries it outside in a wooden bucket and dumps it in a pile behind the bakery. The ash will be used eventually, perhaps spread on the garden that Agnes keeps in the small yard behind the bakery, or sold to someone who uses it for making soap or for other purposes. When the oven is clean, Thomas stands back and surveys the bakery. It looks better. Not pristine, it will never be pristine, but cleaner. The floor is swept, the table is scrubbed. The tools are washed and hung on pegs on the wall. The racks are cleared of bread, and the few remaining loaves are covered with cloths to keep them from drying out too much overnight. The sun is setting now. The light slanting through the window is golden and warm, but also fading. Shadows are deepening. The town outside is beginning to settle into evening. The pace of activity is slowing. People are going home. Shops are closing. The market square is emptying. Thomas is exhausted. Not just tired, but completely drained. Every muscle in his body aches. He moves slowly, stiffly, like an old man. He is only 43, but he feels much older. As the last light fades from the sky, the bakery grows quiet. The work is done, or mostly done. There is always something more that could be done, some surface that could be cleaned more thoroughly, some tool that could be repaired, some preparation that could be made for tomorrow. But Thomas is too tired. They are all too tired. There comes a point in the day when you simply have to stop, when your body will not go on, when the work will have to wait until tomorrow. Agnes prepares a simple supper. Bread, of course. There is always bread in a baker's house. She takes one of the loaves baked this morning and cuts thick slices from it with a large knife. The crust is hard, and it takes effort to cut through it. The interior of the loaf is soft and chewy, with irregular holes where the fermentation created air pockets. She sets the slices on the table. There is also cheese. A small piece, perhaps half a pound, of hard yellow cheese made from cow's milk. It was purchased yesterday at the market. Agnes cuts the cheese into slices. Thin slices because cheese is expensive and must be rationed carefully. There are also some onions, small and pungent, and a bit of dried fish, salty and tough. This is supper. Bread, cheese, onions, fish, simple, plain, but adequate, more food than many people have. There are families in this town, families of day labourers, beggars, the sick and infirm who go to bed hungry every night. Thomas and his family are fortunate. They have enough. They sit together at the kneading table to eat. There are no chairs, just rough wooden benches. Thomas sits at one end, Agnes at the other. Richard and John sit on the sides. They eat in silence, or mostly in silence. There is not much conversation. They are too tired for talk. Their minds are empty, focused only on the food in front of them, on the act of eating, on satisfying the hunger that gnaws at their bellies. Thomas chews his bread slowly. It is good bread, he thinks with a sort of detached satisfaction. The crust is crisp and flavorful. The interior is soft and has a pleasant, slightly sour taste from the fermentation. The cheese is sharp and salty, complementing the bread. The onion is crisp and biting, clearing the palate. The fish is salty and provides a different texture, something to chew on. They eat methodically, not with pleasure exactly, but with a kind of grim determination. Eating is a necessity, fuel for the body. There is no time or energy for savoring or enjoyment. That is a luxury for the wealthy, for those who do not work with their hands from dawn to dusk. When they have finished eating, Agnes collects the scraps and the bits of food that have fallen on the table. She feeds these to the chickens that live in a small coop in the yard behind the bakery. The chickens provide eggs, which are sold at the market for a few pennies, adding a small amount to the family's income. Thomas pushes himself up from the bench with effort. He crosses to the table and pours the coins from his leather pouch onto the surface. They clink and clatter, a small pile of copper and silver. He counts them carefully, separating them into piles by denomination. Pennies here, halfpennies here, farthings here. He counts twice to make sure he has not made a mistake. It is a reasonable amount. Not a fortune, but adequate. Enough to buy more flour tomorrow. Enough to pay the rent on the bakery at the end of the month, which is due to the landlord who owns this building and several others on this street. Enough to feed his family and his apprentices. Enough to replace a tool if one breaks, or to buy more firewood when the current supply runs out. But not much more than that. There are no savings here, no money set aside for the future. Everything earned is spent, month after month, year after year. If Thomas were to become too sick to work, the family would be in trouble quickly. If the oven were to crack and need major repairs, they would struggle to find the money. But these are worries for another day. For now, today has been a good day. The bread was baked, the bread was sold, money was earned. He places the coins carefully into a small wooden box. The box is plain, undecorated, with a simple hinged lid. He closes the lid and crosses to the kneading table. He gets down on his hands and knees and reaches under the table, feeling for a particular floorboard. There, he finds it. This board is loose, deliberately left unfastened. He pries it up, revealing a small hollow space beneath. This is where he hides the money box. It is not a very secure hiding place. Anyone who knew to look would find it, but it is better than leaving the money visible, where a thief entering through the window might see it and grab it. He places the box in the hollow and replaces the floorboard, pressing it down firmly. Then he stands, groaning slightly at the effort. The boys have already retreated to their sleeping space. Thomas can hear them settling onto their straw pallets, the rustle of straw, the creak of floorboards. They murmur to each other in low voices for a moment, words Thomas cannot make out. Then they are silent. Within minutes, he is sure, they will be asleep. Young people fall asleep so easily. Thomas envies them that. Agnes banks the fire in the hearth, carefully covering the embers with a layer of fine ash. This will keep them alive through the night, smouldering slowly, so that in the morning the fire can be rekindled without the need to create a new spark. She works quietly, efficiently, her movements practiced from years of doing this same task every night. Then, she, too, retreats to the sleeping chamber, pushing aside the curtain and disappearing into the darkness beyond. Thomas sits alone for a moment longer. He sits on the bench beside the kneading table, his hands resting on his thighs, his head bowed. The bakery is dark now, lit only by the faint glow of the banked fire and the last bit of twilight coming through the window. The air is still smoky, though less so than during the day. It smells of smoke and bread and sweat, and the honest smell of hard work. It is the smell of his life. He is so tired, so very, very tired. Every bone in his body aches. His back feels as though someone has beaten it with a stick. His hands throb. His knees are stiff. His shoulders burn. His eyes are gritty and sore. He cannot remember the last time he did not ache. But tomorrow he will get up before dawn and do it all again. Mix the dough, knead the dough, heat the oven, bake the bread, sell the bread, clean, sleep, and then again, and again, and again. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. This is his life. This is what he knows. He is Thomas the baker. He makes bread. There is a kind of satisfaction in it, he supposes, though he does not often think about it in those terms. The satisfaction of doing work that matters. People need bread. Bread keeps them alive. Without bakers like Thomas, people would starve. So his work matters. It is not glamorous. It is not exciting, but it matters. He stands slowly, groaning softly. Every movement hurts. He crosses to the sleeping chamber and pushes aside the curtain. Agnes is already in bed, already asleep, her breathing slow and even. He can just barely see her shape in the darkness. He removes his shoes and sets them beside the bed. He does not remove his tunic or his hose. He will sleep in his clothes, as he does every night. He climbs into bed carefully, trying not to disturb Agnes. The straw mattress rustles and shifts under his weight. He lies on his back, staring up at the ceiling that he cannot see in the darkness. His body begins to relax, slowly, gradually. The aches do not go away, but they recede slightly, becoming more bearable. He closes his eyes. His breathing slows. His mind begins to drift. And within minutes, he is asleep. Tomorrow, in the darkness before dawn, he will wake and begin again. And so ends our day with Thomas the baker. We have followed him from darkness to darkness, through the endless cycle of mixing, kneading, shaping, baking, and selling. There has been no drama here, no excitement, no great events, just work. The same work he does every day, the same work his father did before him, the same work countless bakers have done for thousands of years. This is how bread was made, day after day, year after year, generation after generation, by hand, by men and women like Thomas, in bakeries like this one. It was hard work, repetitive work, exhausting work. Work that aged you before your time, that wore out your body, that left you with a constant ache in your bones. But it was necessary work, essential work. Without bakers, there would be no bread. Without bread, people would starve. We, in our modern world, do not often think about where our bread comes from. We buy it in neat plastic bags at the supermarket. It is soft and white and perfectly uniform. We do not see the work that goes into it. We do not see the farmers who grow the wheat, the millers who grind the flour, the bakers who mix and knead and bake. We do not think about the hours of labor, the physical strain, the endless repetition.